going to be looking at task 6 from the iteration week. So task 6 says modify the previous program, and the previous program was to generate a star. Oh, went a bit quick there. With a height of 5. So do our decomposition, our input, process, our output. Input is to get the height. The output is the stars, the current row of stars, display the triangle. And we don't quite know the process yet, so let's try and solve it a bit. So we'll view what it's seen. So for each line, it contains the amount of stars or asterisks for that line. So for line 1 contains 1, line 2 contains 2, line 3 contains 3. So we're starting to see a pattern there also. So, and as it's a loops task, we can see that we should be using a for loop because we know how many iterations it's going to have. So we don't need to look to x condition, we know how many iterations. So let's use the for loop. And with that, we can then nest another for loop in it. So we can use the lines, the height, and how many stars printed by also the height, but it's the current line. So construct each line as we go. You can identify the pattern. Each line has an increasing amount of stars that directly corresponds or is equal to the current line number. When we abstract the problem a bit, so the stars don't matter, right? So the height doesn't matter. Right? You construct a line the same way. It's the current line or the current loop iteration equals the length of the. So let's go ahead and write our pseudocode. Take an input. And from there we know it's a for loop. So for the current row or the current line is 1 to the height. We're not starting from 0 this time, so we don't need to do maths on the loops. And then for the column within the line is 1 to the current line or row. And then add a star to the current line, end the 2 fors, and print the current line out. And because it's JavaScript, we have to do it as one whole line. So print it within the first for loop, or the line or row for loop, and that means we also have to create a blank line each time. So that should be our pseudocode. So let's jump onto the code. Move this across just so we can see what we're doing. We can base it off. So let height equal to whatever the value of the prompt was, whatever the user enters. And for let row equal 1 to row is less than or equal to height, and plus plus for the modifier, add 1. That creates the loop for the lines. And let's create the loop for the columns. So let column equal 1, and column is less than or equal to the current row or the current line, and then column plus plus, add 1. Remember, let's create a blank line each time, each loop, and then current line equals current line plus an asterisk, so we can add an asterisk to it, and then we'll print out that line. So remember, this isn't the task we're trying to solve, it's the previous task. So we're there, we should be able to save it. Let's bring up our debugger and actually get our debugging console up. Oh, that's the wrong thing I've dragged. I'll go ahead and attach that to triangle, we'll say 5, and we have our 5 from the first task. And we can change our watch variables so that it contains the variables we actually have. So height, let's watch height, let's watch row, let's watch column, and let's watch the current line also. And we'll set a couple of breakpoints and we'll look through and make sure it's working. there's nothing there because no breakpoint yet, not hitting, so go ahead. 5, and we're within the nested loop, so the height is 5, the current row is 1, the column is 1, which is correct, and our current line now has a star. Column doesn't exist because scoping, column only exists within the for loop, but our row remains. So row 2, column 1 because we're starting, and the current line now contains a star because we've just added it, and then we've got 2 at the second breakpoint, and we can see how it builds up now. So that was task 1, but that wasn't the task for the problem. The problem was modify the previous program to produce. So we've just solved the previous problem or program, so now we have to solve this one. So it's modify, so we need to actually just modify. So the computational thinking should remain the same: input, process, output, acquire the height, produce the line for the process, output the line, or output the triangle. But yeah, the actual solution's a bit different. So let's actually just look at the actual problem and solve it. So for line 1 we have a star, and line 2 we have 2 stars, and Word's not playing with me here. So let's set the height to 3. So if we had 3, height of 3, let's put it to a fixed width font, it would be triangle like this. So we can see that there's 2 spaces and then a star. So you can see that the current line, there's a link between the current line and the amount of stars. Line 1 has 1 star, but there's also a link between the height and the position. So for line 1 and a free height triangle, then the star goes in position 3. So there's 2 spaces before. For line 2 and a free height triangle, the stars go in position 2 and 3, and the line should have 2 stars. We can see that there's a pattern there. So the spaces to pad at the start of the line are the current height, or the current row, minus the current line. So the height is 3, and then it's minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, etc. So we can work out how many spaces we have. So 2, 1, 0. Now we can achieve this with nested loops. There's other ways to do it, but we could do it with a single loop for height, but let's use nested loops. So we can use the same nested loop program, but then put an inner if statement within the innermost loop. And because we're modifying the program, our pseudocode should remain mostly the same. So if we go ahead and on the line column, we check if it's less than the maths work, height minus row, then add a space, else add a star. And we go ahead and implement that in our code. So if the column is less than height minus row, add a space, else add the star. There's our space, and take our breakpoints away, add some new ones, and go ahead and run the program. Input height 5, and we can start. It will start to break down. We shouldn't have really included the debugger at this point, but oh, we have a strange output. That's not what we were expecting, was it? So undo our breakpoints, make sure to run it again just in case. And yep, that's definitely not the output we were expecting. Something went wrong there. So let's go back to our pseudocode, back to our analysis for the height to the row, to the rows of the line, and oh, yep, each line must contain every column. We messed up our maths a wee bit there. So for every line, it must contain every column. So we go all the way to the end of the line, and go ahead again and fix that. So there we go. We now have every line now has every column. So it basically generates a rectangle, but only fills in the stars on the correct positions.